One of the most common misconceptions about Lost that has been perpetuated since the show ended in 2010 is that the characters were dead the whole time. This misconception has been debunked ad nauseum by both the showrunners, commentators and fans. I won't spend too much time going over this familiar ground, but, just for the record, everything we see happening in the Flash sideways takes place somewhere between the point of death and the afterlife. It is not an alternate timeline nor is it set in the living world. Everything happening outside of the sideways universe is the real, living world, in which actions have consequences and the stakes are incredibly real. The Flash sideways exists within the source, aka the light beneath the island that runs across the Earth and powers our whole existence. Think of the island like a power station that generates energy for an entire city. If the power station blows up or is shut down entirely, the city will fall into darkness. But if this particular power station dies, the city's darkness will last forever. In Season 6 episode, Across the Sea, Mother explains that a piece of the source's light exists inside every human being. This light can be seen as either a person's soul, or their consciousness. It is our memories, our emotions, our experiences. It makes us who we are. When we die, our light returns to the source for quote-unquote rebirth. What rebirth means is never made entirely clear. What we know is that before our light rejoins with the source, we must first let go of the life we knew and come to terms with our own death. The Flash sideways is a construct within the source itself. A way to help the human mind ease into a new form of existence, perhaps one that is pure consciousness without form. Think of the sideways universe as being almost like a virtual simulation, populated entirely by the consciousness of every being that ever existed. It will look different to people who died in different eras. It's always a subjective reflection of the world that each person remembers or finds the most familiar. What we are seeing in Season 6 is the Losties' very own specific corner of this reality that they create for themselves in order to find each other in death. Much like a lost and found section in an airport, where people are reunited with their missing items and lost baggage before they leave through the exit. Before walking out that exit, a person needs to understand what is inside their respective baggage. Every character has something that they need to accept, experience or reckon with before they can move on into the light. Let's run through a character example to demonstrate this. Jack Shepard's entire life led him towards saving the island, and the world, in 2007. His destiny was to become a protector, vanquish the man in black, and restart the source. Simply put, he fulfilled his purpose in life. However, there were loose ends from his life that went unfulfilled. He never got to reconcile with his father, whom was the chief antagonist throughout most of his life, and he never got to be a father himself. Or, at least, to become the kind of father he always wished he could have had.
Don't choose, Jack. Don't decide. You don't want to be a hero. You don't want to try and save everyone. Because when you fail, you just don't have what it takes.
So the Flash sideways provides him with this opportunity. To know what it is like to have a child, to raise him, and to love him. And to get it right.
You know, when I was your age, my father didn't want to see me fail either. He used to say to me that he said that I didn't have what it takes. Spent my whole life carrying that around with me. I don't ever want you to feel that way. I will always love you. No matter what you do, in my eyes, you can never fail.
As for who David Shepard really was, we can only speculate. There are, as I see it, only two possible explanations for his existence in the sideways. Option 1. David is a construct from Jack's subconscious. He looks and behaves just as Jack did when he was that age. The boy is a direct reflection of his younger self, created in order to help Jack be the good father he never got to be in real life. This way, Jack can give his younger self the love, support, warmth and wisdom that Christian Shepard never did when he was growing up. It's a way of reaching a catharsis that he could not achieve in life. Hence why David is encouraged and supported in his musical pursuits with piano playing. Something that it is implied that Jack might have done had he not been driven into the family business. Option 2. A popular fan theory is that David Shepard is in fact Jack's real son by way of Kate. Before they return to the island in 2007, Jack and Kate spend the night together and make love. It is then that Kate becomes pregnant. She returns to the island and events play out as seen. It isn't until after she leaves the island, and Jack, that she will realize she is with child. Jack's child. This theory would mean that David Shepard is as real as anyone in the Sideways and is getting to know the father he never had. This option does raise questions, however. Why would David have no interactions with Kate, his alleged mother? And why would he not be in the church at the end? These are valid questions. The only one which can be answered is why David is not in the church. There are many characters of great importance to the lives of our Losties who are not there. Locke moves on without the love of his life Helen by his side. Hurley's parents are absent from the church, as is Charlie's brother Liam, and Jack's mother. The reason for why certain family members or loved ones are absent from the church is because moving on is not about family or friends. It is about something deeper, more spiritual. No one rejoins with the source alone. You move into the light with your soulmates. By soulmates, I don't necessarily mean it in the romantic sense of the word. This transcends the relationships of the everyday world we live in. The amount of time you spent with someone or how well you knew them becomes immaterial. What matters is how you are connected beyond the physical. Soulmates, in the Sideways sense, simply means the people you were bound together with by fate and destiny in the living world. Take Jack as the lead example. The light within him was bound to the people he met on the island, not just through their experiences there together, but because they were all connected by the island and its grand tapestry of time. Their fates were entwined, regardless of flesh and blood, language, nationality, gender, ethnicity or religion. There was never a point in their lives where they weren't going to meet each other and have these experiences. In spiritual philosophy, soulmates transcend the concept of family and friends, and even total strangers. Soulmates are considered to be people with whom you may have lived many lifetimes together with, in different states of being, regardless of your relationships to one another. This is the implication for our Losties. Some of them have shared experiences in life, of course. Just as some went on to have shared experiences beyond anything we ever see in the show. But just because someone like Shannon had no real-world living connection to someone like Penny doesn't mean they are not connected by the same people, the same love, and, more importantly, the same light. Each of their light creates one piece of a collective whole. But we see that the Sideways is populated by many different souls, all of whom are on their own journeys. Some of whom we recognize from their connections to the island, and some of whom are merely strangers passing through the same dream and occasionally interacting. They too will come to terms with their own deaths and move on into the light with their own soulmates. We get a sense of this with Ben Linus. He sits outside the church, not ready to move on. In part because he has not reconciled with his actions on the living plane. But also because the group inside the church are not his soulmates in which his light was most deeply entwined with. Ben must help his people remember and seek their forgiveness before rejoining with the source. He begins this process by apologizing to John Locke and seeking forgiveness, of which he is granted. After this, Ben will no doubt seek the forgiveness of Alex and her mother Danielle, helping them to remember their lives. After all, it isn't just love and joy that helps people to remember their lives, it is also pain, loss, grief and regret. The emotions that we felt the most strongly during life. Once Ben has made peace with himself and those he wronged in the Sideways, he will be able to move on with them. A question that is quite often asked about the rules of the Sideways universe is, what happens to the people who appear to die in it? After all, we see villains such as Martin Keamy, his right-hand man Omar, and even Mikhail get killed. What does this mean within the context of the afterlife? Well, cast your minds back to Dogen's scale of balance within people. A metaphorical concept that represents the idea of morality within human beings. Take Martin Keamy as an example of that scale. His inner light turned to darkness during his life. The balance within him slid too far in the wrong direction. He did not make contrition for his bad deeds nor did he ever attempt to redeem his actions in life. So, in the Sideways universe, someone like Keamy is still reckoning with that darkness inside of himself. He is in denial about his own death in the same way as everyone else, but his own soulmate or mates are not nearly as clear to him as they might be to our Losties. He cannot remember who he was or what he did without finding those connections and making peace with the memories of his life. Regardless, death does not function the same way in the Sideways as it does in reality. In fact, death has no dominion in the sideways at all. So, that means there are two possibilities of what happens to people like Kimi after they have been killed. The first is that they die and then reset like a video game character, reliving the exact same sequence of events in the sideways as they have before. Like Groundhog Day, they are stuck in a never-ending loop from which they cannot escape. Almost like a karmic punishment for all the wrong they did. This would very much be in keeping with the notions of what hell would be like. The second possibility is that they wake up again in a different scenario and will be given different choices. After he is shot, Kimi will wake up in the sideways again but experience different people and places from his life. Like Syed, he could be offered the chance to find the connections to his humanity once again and to make amends for any wrong he caused. Perhaps with the help of someone from his past. Before his light had turned to darkness. It is these final choices in the sideways that will determine if they are ready to return to the light or not. As we see with Ana Lucia, some people are simply not quite ready to do that just yet, and certainly not ready to sit alongside our Losties. Something is holding them back, or they have yet to reconnect with the right person and remember. Some move on beforehand, such as Mr. Echo and his brother Yemi, who do not need anyone else. Meanwhile, others will move on after the church group has departed, such as Ana Lucia. I use the terms, before and after, in a completely relative senses of the words. Time doesn't matter within the sideways, any more than it does when you are inside a dream. Circling back to this idea of death in the sideways, and the potential notion of hell, nothing captures this more clearly than when we look at someone like John Locke's father, Anthony Cooper. This is the closest we ever see to a clear version of what hell would be like. He is in a catatonic state, akin to locked-in syndrome, where he is aware of his environment but unable to interact with it. What could be an interpretation as to why he is like this? Is it possible that Cooper remembered all of the awful things he did to people throughout his life? And is it possible that his actions proved to be too much for him to take, therefore trapping him inside himself? In this state, Anthony Cooper cannot seek forgiveness or find any soulmates, if indeed he ever had any. It might even be the case that a person without soulmates cannot move on. If you lived a life without any love or connection, then you will forever be stuck in this purgatory state. Therefore, people like Cooper are indeed trapped in hell. Whether or not he will ever be able to escape this prison of the soul is unclear. Like Kimi, we can only hypothesize what happens to the seemingly irredeemable. If Cooper quote-unquote dies within this locked-in state, he could potentially reawaken again in the same sideways loop, or in a completely different scenario. This is left entirely open to speculation. The sideways is incredibly symbolic and not always literal. What makes it so fascinating is that it opens itself up to varied interpretations depending on your point of view. And that's ultimately what the Flash sideways boils down to. Point of view, reflections in a mirror of one's self-image. Remembrances of a life from inside a dream. From self-actualization to collective catharsis. But each person has to find their own way to the church first. Because the way they experience the sideways is entirely subjective, therefore their path towards enlightenment will be deeply personal. And we only ever see the sideways from the perspective of our Losties and their specific perceptions of themselves and one another. A good example of this subjectivity is in how Aaron is portrayed. His rebirth occurs in the sideways and this helps Claire, Charlie and Kate to remember who they really are. His presence is a galvanizing moment for all three souls. This also holds true for Jack, since his memories of the island sync up directly to when Aaron was just a newborn baby there, as it will for several other characters in the church. When Jack walks into the room, we are seeing the people within it through his eyes. As viewers, we should not be limited by the illusion that the rules of reality still apply in this place. After all, Aaron lived a full life of his own, growing up and growing old. Kate would have, presumably, died an old woman, yet we see her as she was on the island. And that is true for them all. To Aaron, he might perceive being in that church as a grown man, surrounded by his own soulmates. In a dream state, the dreamer experiences it subjectively, not objectively. The film Inception explores a similar notion with the perception of reality. Just like the cipher that is David Shepard, the sideways presents this dream reality to its occupants in a way that will best help him to let go and move on. For Jack, it is seeing his soulmates as he remembered them on the island. An alternative perspective in the church could see an adult Aaron standing alongside the second generation of Losties, including Gion, Clementine, Little Charlie and Walt. Finally, we need to talk about why the island is underwater at the beginning of Season 6. There are three explanations, none of which need contradict the other. The first is that you can see the island being sunk in very literal terms. The Sideways created an alternate reality in which our characters' lives were not influenced by the island, allowing them to live a second life free from external influences such as Jacob, without their paths being course-corrected by the source. The second explanation is that, since the characters are now inside of the source, the island has no purpose there. It is only needed in the living world. The island is an axis mundi of sorts, i.e. a place on Earth connected to a celestial plane. In the third explanation, and one that still connects with the previous two, the island being at the bottom of the ocean is largely symbolic. In the Sideways, no one remembers their true lives or their deaths until they are ready to move on. And they don't remember the island or their experiences on it either. So the island remains hidden deep beneath the vast ocean of the collective unconscious, waiting to be rediscovered, waiting to be remembered. To summarize, the Flash Sideways is a large collective dream made up of memories, emotions, symbols and subconscious truths experienced in life by all people. But each person experiences it subjectively. It is in this purgatory state that they learn to let go of the life they knew and their own personal baggage. They find that constants from the living world then all move on together to rejoin the source and become one with it again. The ultimate message of Lost is a simple idea, that we are all connected, by time and fate, through light and darkness, and in life, and in death. Thank you for watching this series and supporting this channel. Please like, share and subscribe in order to see more Lost Explained content. Until the next time, stay lost.